Sourdough does not have to be scary or hard. Anyone can do it.
Anyone. If I can do it, you can do it. Hey everyone, welcome back to Heartway Farms. I'm Annie and today I'm here with Julianne, my oldest daughter, and we are talking about all things sourdough. We love sourdough. It's a hot topic out there in the world of Instagram and homesteaders and home bakers and just families. And so today we want to cover some of our most frequently asked questions that we get pretty consistently. Wouldn't you say every day we get?
Yeah, we get new sourdough starter questions and sourdough bread questions every single day.
We ship out our sourdough across the whole country, and when people receive that, they get instructions, but people still have questions, and that's kind of part of the deal when you order from us, that you are able to ask questions, and we're happy to answer those. So we get a lot of questions pretty consistently when it comes to sourdough. So I was like, Jules, let's sit down today. Let's talk about some of these questions and try to give people some answers, to give them some direction. And sometimes it's easier just to talk it out instead of just reading printed instructions and whatnot. So let's dive right into our sourdough FAQs. Okay, first question we want to cover is, can I make my own sourdough starter at home?
Yes, you can. And actually we have a video up already. It's an older video, but we have that and you can learn how to make one. I take you through the step-by-step process on how to make that, but it takes a little bit of time, but if you're willing to put in that initial effort, it usually turns out very well. It's easy, it's simple, it's only like 2 ingredients, and I've done it more than once and I really enjoy it.
And you've had success.
And I've had success.
We have, I think you combined our 2 starters, if I remember, or are they separated?
I had them separate, but now they're pretty much combined.
Now they're combined.
With the master starter here.
Yeah, the beautiful, there's such a fun story behind this starter. I don't know if we're gonna get to it today, maybe little teasers about this sourdough starter, but you began by making your own.
Yes,
before we ever had anyone send us a starter. And just real quick, this is not an instructional video. We will link that video down in the description, or maybe put it up here, so that you can go watch the step-by-step process on how to capture your own wild yeast in your home, which is so cool. But real quick, what's the general breakdown if you're making your own starter?
So if you're starting with absolutely nothing, all you do is take water and flour, mix them together, and then with a series of adding to it and taking away from it, after a period of upwards of 2 weeks, or sometimes a little shorter, a little longer, each starter is different, eventually you have a starter. It's alive, it's bubbly, it's full of yeast, and it smells amazing.
You can't beat sourdough, it's so good. We've always loved it, and before we even knew anything about, making it at home, we used to buy it and spend our money on it, but you just can't beat the quality, the taste, the ingredients,
artisan crust.
Beautiful, beautiful homemade sourdough bread. So yes, you can absolutely make your own sourdough starter at home. There might be a little trial and error involved, but you can absolutely do that. But as we already discussed, there's so many opportunities to purchase organic, all natural, beautiful starters that are already bubbly and healthy and ready to go. Julianne offers her starter online, so make sure you check that out below. It's part of the girls' business. They sell their products, and it's so cool to kind of be able to take this beautiful hot mess right here and ship it out to all over the country, to people's houses and homes, and then to receive pictures.
Yes.
And people's beautiful breads and bagels and all these awesome things. It's so much fun. All right, let's move on to the next question. Hey friends, you have been asking and asking, and we have finally created cookbooks for all of you to enjoy. If you love cooking from scratch and baking at home and making good, nutritious food for your family, these are the cookbooks for you. Make sure you check them out. Now back to the video. So someone has received their sourdough starter, whether it's from us or from a local friend or a co-op or a mom. They made it. So I have my starter. What do I do next?
There's a lot of things you can do.
But this is where people stress out.
Yes.
Okay, so let's just give some backstory. Usually people, let's say we're shipping a starter to somebody. You measure out a starter, we package it, we, expedite it to the customer, and then they receive it. What instructions do we give them to do?
So you take your starter that you just received and you would open it and transfer it to a clean glass jar of some kind. It's not really, it can be like this, it can be like a mason jar, it can be like a Pyrex. It's not really a big deal as long as it's not sealed. So that way there's air to be able to go in, air is able to go into it, as long as it's not airtight. You can even just like set like your mason jar lid on top and just not screw it down. Same thing, it would work
When you
really
just
well.
open that, it just smells like
wafts.
delightfulness. It smells like a bakery.
And then what I do is I put in equal parts of flour and water. So like I would put in like 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of water to the starter that I just got. I'll mix it up and then I'll put it in the fridge. And then if you want to bake with it, you can bake with it the next day, the day after, a few days after. You can feed it again if you want more volume of starter.
Another question we get, when people receive it and they're like, well, oops, I left it on the counter for a couple hours. They really are pretty forgiving.
Yeah.
Like it's alive and it's bubbly and it's full of yeast and all that goodness. So it's really gives you, it does show you a lot of grace. Like if you leave it on the counter for the whole day because you forgot, it's no big deal. Just put it back in the fridge. And if you do it in the fridge, it'll ferment slowly as opposed to on the counter, So you can do a combination of both. But I think the important part is not to freak out and not to get overwhelmed by the process at first. It is a science, but it also is just a God-given, beautiful, fermented thing.
It's a science, but really it's more of an art. It's a very, at least the way I do it, it's a very much an intuitive process. It's, oh, it looks like it's hungry, I'm gonna feed it. Oh, I haven't fed it in 2 weeks, what do? Oh, it looks hungry, I'm gonna feed it. Oh, it doesn't look like I need to feed it. I'm not gonna feed it.
Not everyone is
as chill
like
as I
Julianne.
am with this thing, but
we've learned through this process, and I think it's good because everybody is different, and the world needs all those types of different people. People that will just make up recipes and then none of us can ever replicate it because Julianne didn't write it down, right?
Hey, I've gotten better. I can write stuff down
I'm like,
now.
please write it down. It was so good, But then there's people that, like, if they don't have a recipe, they can't do it. And it's okay. And I think there's a place and a time for all of those things. So that's why we're doing this video, to kind of give some help.
Both ways. If you want to measure out your ingredients for your starter, do so. Whatever makes you comfortable, whatever is successful for you, whatever works.
Or if you're Julianne, just, a little of that and a little of that and a little of this and you're...
I think that looks right.
Smells right. Okay, so that's what you can do. There's a lot of crazy things and crazy instructions when it comes to kind of getting your sourdough starter up and off the ground, but that's just your basic instruction. How often would you this might be on the question list again, how often will you feed it? Let's say you get your starter, you feed it day 1. You should start seeing some bubbling, we'll cover this later, but not bubbling out of your container.
Along the side of the container, you'll see a few like little air pockets. That's all you'll see. You won't see like a bunch of rising and falling, especially if you keep it in the fridge like I do.
It slows it down.
It slows it down, which is nice because it means it's less likely to die if you forget to feed it, which I do. So,
I told you, she's like super chill.
If I can do it, guys, anyone can do it.
It's no joke. And I think it's beautiful. And it's one of the things I love about Julianne because she is such a free spirit in the kitchen. And because you love doing it, I remember not wanting to stifle that and be like, no, you must measure it like Grandma Porter measured it. I think I did probably say that. I still do it. Yeah, Marie's the rule follower. Julianne is the free spirit in the kitchen. So, all right, so that's what you do when you receive your starter. Again, Julianne offers this beautiful starter, but let's move on to the next question. This next one's pretty important. What kind of water should I use to feed my starter?
So again, this can be as simple or as complicated as you want to go, but as long as you're willing to drink the water, I would be willing to put it in here. So like, I don't prefer drinking like chlorinated water or water with fluoride in it, so I'll use the water that's in the Berkey through my water filtering system, and I'll use that for baking and for feeding it. If you want, some people use only bottled water, some people use tap water.
And we are on a well,
yeah.
So our water is not treated.
Yes.
So we don't have fluoride, we don't have chlorine. I think it is highly recommended not to use those things because think about, adding chlorine.
The chlorine's put in the water to kill the bacteria, which is you want that. You don't want to be drinking dirty water. But
make
it
you sick.
also might kill the bacteria in here. Because this is bacteria, just the good kind.
It'll kill the good bacteria along with the bad bacteria. So it's highly recommended not to use any chlorinated water or treated water. You even kind of want to be careful with how much salt is in your water with softener systems and stuff, but it has never, because of how sulfury our water is here and our well is, we do have a salt water system on the property, and it has never interfered with our sourdough starter. We do run all of our drinking water through the Berkey, but we've never had an issue with that. So I'll take any feedback from y'all if you guys have had that interfere.
And as a rule of thumb, I use filtered water without chlorine, without fluoride, and it's totally fine. It's a happy, healthy starter.
All right, next question. So my sourdough starter is not rising and falling and bubbling all over the container like I see on Instagram. What's going on, and is that okay?
That is totally okay. My starter has never done that.
Social media is a lot of fun, and we use it and we love it and we appreciate it, but it's not always reality, right? So we have never had it bubbling out. I'm sure you could if you really let it get alive and crazy.
You definitely can do it, and actually how they do that is they use very controlled temperature, environment, humidity levels, and how much flour and water, what kind of flour and water they use. So if you want to be that specific, you can get a rise like that, but it is definitely not necessary for the everyday sourdough bread baker.
No, and if your goal, and we do this, if your goal is to have like a long ferment flavor, you do that by using your starter, not by, your starter doesn't have to be super duper crazy sourdoughy bubbly. You can do a long ferment once you've actually made your loaf of bread to make it more digestible, to make it more delicious and all of that. But you don't have to do that in this stage of the game. This can just be like this, and it's still active. Like I can open it, and the top layer is covered in bubbles, and the smell is absolutely, without a doubt, sourdough and fermented, and you can smell all of those things, but the bubbles are just all over the top. I've never had the sourdough starter do that, but my pizza crust does it almost every time, that it just wants to come out of the bowl. It just depends on your ratios. Yeah, your ratios of, because I use yeast for that. So your ratios of yeast with water and flour and all of that, and how big your bowl is. One of these days I need to use a bigger bowl. But anyway, so don't stress about it. Don't compare your starter to, Instagram all the time. Just it's a little bit of a reality check that it's gonna be okay. All right, this next one is super important and incredibly valuable in our day and age. Can I make a gluten-free sourdough starter?
So yes.
That's it.
I've never done it myself, but I know there's tons of people online, on YouTube.
Friends,
people have done it and they've had great success with it. I've just never done it. I've always just done it this way.
And the only difference is the type of flour that you use. And we are not gluten-free experts, don't even pretend to be. So yes, you absolutely can do that. Go find people on social media that do that well and follow them. Next question, can I use, what flours can I use for making my sourdough starter? Do I have to use wheat flour? Do I have to use white all-purpose flour? Give me the scoop on that.
So honestly, you can use almost any kind of flour you want. It just depends on what kind of work you're willing to put into it. But you can easily use any kind of white flour, any kind of whole wheat flour, rye, pumpernickel, einkorn, and use it pretty much the same way. You just maybe need to vary how much water you put into your bread and how long you bake it. Like I notice whenever I make a whole wheat loaf, I have to bake it for 5 to 10 minutes longer than my white bread loaf, just because it retains more moisture.
But we don't use we don't use whole wheat in our starter. Our preference, and this is strictly because of flavor, is to use organic, all-purpose flour that we know the source. Those are our preferences, and so we've always just fed ours with that. And then from your base, you take that, and one of my favorite loaves is half all-purpose organic flour mixed with
the spelt.
Thank you. Is the spelt, and I love that combination. It gives a beautiful texture to the loaf. We have done whole wheat. The little kids don't love it that much, but it's actually delicious and amazing. I love all of the dark flours too, the rye and the pumpernickel and all that, but it's not always a kid's favorite. So we tend to stick with what everybody will eat. So like when we're adding this into blueberry pancakes, you know, the white flour is a beautiful pairing when you're making something yummy like that, or bagels or desserts. So you can change this into whatever you really want it to be. But for our starter, our preference is to use that beautiful white organic all-purpose unbleached flour.
But like say you want to have an all whole wheat starter, you can take a white flour starter and then over time gradually change it to an all whole wheat flour starter. I know people have done that.
Absolutely.
I've added wheat flour to this before in the past. It's probably not wheat anymore because it's
been a while.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
But it all works well.
And it's easier than it looks, or than sometimes people think that it is. You don't have to stress about it. Let's say you need to feed your starter and you're out of that organic all-purpose white flour, but you have whole wheat, just use it. It's okay. It's not going to wreck it. It's just kind of like it's a long-term commitment.
Yes.
It's a long-term relationship with your starter.
How old is this thing? It's older than I am by many, many times over.
Well,
was it like 200
years
old?
200 plus. We'll get there. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So you kind of already talked about this, but okay, let's say I completely got busy, had to leave the country for a month, forgot to feed my starter, forgot to get a sourdough starter babysitter, and it's been sitting in the back of the fridge. Uh-oh, did I ruin it? Is it done? What's going on?
Well, there's a way you can find out. What you can do is you can pull your starter out of the fridge and then feed it however much it is. So like if it's a small amount of starter, do like 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of water, mix it up, leave it on the counter for 24 hours. If you see bubbles of any kind, it's good. I've not fed my starter for long periods of time before, like it's been 2 weeks. One time I forgot it for like a month just because I don't know what happened.
Well, we had multiple too.
No, this is the main one.
Oh, really? This one?
Yeah, this one.
I'm just finding this out, you guys. I'm just as sad.
Okay, anyhow, I've left this in the fridge for long periods of time before, totally forgot about it, got busy, who knows, and then I just fed it again and it was totally fine.
Well, we'll cover the liquid, so stay tuned. We'll cover like when there's liquid on top and different things like that. But again, yes, you absolutely can kill a sourdough starter, and I do know that that happens, and sometimes it really just depends on the bacteria that is alive in there and how much of it there is and all of that. But the beautiful thing about the world that we live in today is it's more accessible than I've ever seen before. Like you can order it from online, you can go to a certain stores, carry it, you can do it from scratch at home if you can be patient with it. So it's like, okay, let's say you kill a starter, don't stress about it, it's okay. You can start again and pay a little bit closer attention to the needs of that particular starter and then go from there. It's not like all is lost or I killed it once, what do I do now? That it does happen. I mean, it's kind of like even when we're making like apple scrap vinegar or different things, you kind of expect there to be losses.
Yeah.
Like sometimes stuff just does not ferment well. When you're basing things upon the fermentation process, temperatures in your house, bacteria in the air, it's fluid. It's not like hard and fast. It's like those people who love following the recipes. Sometimes it's tough because it's a fluid motion. It's not just cut and dry. So I would just encourage you to not lose hope. If you are struggling with the first time or the second time on your sourdough starter, you're gonna get it. It's gonna come along and then it'll become like second nature to where you're like, oh, it's no big deal. We'll just, real quick, you can tell by looking at it that it needs to be fed and be taken care of.
That and if you think it's dead, try feeding it. Try pulling it out of the fridge, baby it for a few days. There's probably still life in it somewhere.
Yeah, and you might be surprised that it can come back to life.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens more than I would like to admit that, maybe somebody else forgot to feed or water some plants, and I'll be like, that thing is dead. And then Julianne's like, let's just give it a try.
Give it a few days.
And then it'll come back to life, poof. So, all right, let's move on to the next question. This is a huge, huge, huge question that we get all the time. So my sourdough starter looks runny or liquidy. It has liquid on top. Tell me about that and what should I do?
So if your sourdough starter is like runny all the way through, like you pick it up and it's just like really, really sloppy, like not holding together at all, has zero shape.
Keep talking, I'm gonna get a spoon.
A lot of times all you need to do is just add a little bit more flour. If it's super runny, it can mean it's kind of hungry, it wants some food. So a lot of times just add a little bit of water and a little bit extra flour, just enough to get it like a nice bread texture.
Did you feed this today?
I fed this 3 days ago.
This is so fluffy, but I mean, okay, it's like stretchy.
And then also there's like, other than like this being super runny, a lot of the times there is a, whether it's runny or thick, there's a liquid on top. It's like a clear, cloudy, sometimes almost yellowish in color. That is called the hooch. It's totally normal. It just means it needs to be fed. Some people drain it off. I usually don't, just because it makes it taste more sour, more tart. Anyhow, it's totally natural, totally normal, and it's part of a healthy starter.
It also means it's kind of going through the proper stages, right? And separating. So if you have a new starter and you get it and you see that separation, mix it, feed it. You know, you can dump it off, but again, we don't. Like, we just, you know, Jules just kind of flies by the seat of her pants, and it works. It works for us. And so that's encouraging because it can be not as crazy or as stressful as some people make it out to be. It can be more relaxed. So you can mix that in, feed it again, let it keep on bubbling. But no, like when we open this today, there's no separation. There's no, it's just a beautiful, like sticky, gorgeous, bubbly mix, you know? And you can see, I mean, this is what it looks like, you know? It's not pretty. It's not pretty, but like it's messy, it gets crusty, you know, you can
It's
clean
well loved and
It's
used.
well loved and well used. You can change it between containers if you want, but I would just like take a breath. I look at this and I'm like, okay, that's a little crusty, you know, but like it's totally cool, it's totally fine. It just means that we use it all the time, we feel the time. And, you know, you guys know that flour turns to like paste if it's, you know, touching things on the outside. But it's just a beautiful, living, breathing, fermenting thing that definitely looks like what it is.
It's alive.
It's alive. And it's a hot mess, right? So, all right, let's move on to the next question. All right, we already talked about sourdough that was super duper liquidy and what to do with that. Now, what do I do if my sourdough is too thick to the point where it's like
hard to stir?
Can't stir it, like concrete. What should we do?
Add a little bit of water. That's it. You just mix it in, add a little bit of water, let it ferment a little longer, check on it the next day, and if it's most of the time, it'll be totally fine. Every now and then I'll throw in like, oops, doing a little too much flour, you know.
Because she doesn't measure it.
Because I don't measure it. I vaguely measure it, you know. And then I started and I'm like, seems a little thick, so I'll just throw a little bit extra water in it, and most of the time, it's totally fine.
And it is still fine.
And it's still fine. It's alive. It's good.
I love this. I just think the moral of the story of all of this is like,
chaos
what do I do?
Is okay.
Controlled chaos. And it's okay, and have some fluidity with it, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right, last question for today. I know there's a million that we could cover, but we're just kind of hitting some of these top ones that we get all the time, right? So last but not least, you know, you make a beautiful loaf of bread. And again, we're not covering that today. We have complete instructional videos that we can link down in the description that you can check out, or link here, and watch those videos. Julianne, I mean, she looks so young, but I love that in those videos because she was doing it. She's making all of our bread from scratch as a teenager, and I love that. And I think it's amazing, beautiful. Her and Marie and, you know, me, and we tag team it depending on who's available and who's in charge. But like, your young folks can do this. Like, they can follow this and watch these videos and learn how to make beautiful, organic, healthy bread loaves at home. So we'll link that for you. But so we've made beautiful, gorgeous, homemade loaves of bread. Can I freeze those? What do I do for long-term storage?
So, number one, there is nothing as delicious as fresh bread out of the oven. If you are gonna eat it, my favorite way is to have it fresh, warm from the oven, like just barely cool, butter, jam, you know, all that.
Yeah.
But you can totally freeze it. You can just wrap it up in, a lot of people do plastic wrap, some do aluminum foil, but I like to do a layer of plastic wrap, put it into like a Ziploc bag, and just throw it into the freezer.
And it's, you know, you just bring it out and let it defrost, you know, on its own schedule. If you maybe don't want to go the sourdough route at all, but you still want beautiful, delicious, amazing, homemade, crusty, you know, delicious
artisan bread.
Check out our crusty bread recipe. That's something that, like, you know, our sourdough is about a 2-day process, give or take, or a full 24-hour.
24 when I
24 hour. But usually you set it up at night and then you do it the next day, right? So it feels like a 2-day process. The crusty bread can be made start to finish in a total of 3 to 4 hours, or even faster than that if you want to. We've absolutely made it after like 2 hours and it's just fine. So, but you know, if you want an easy bread recipe, we will link that as well. And you're gonna wanna go check that out, because between the sourdough and crusty bread, those are our top 2 go-to every week, you know, almost every day, recipes that we make fresh. And you, as Julianne already said, you can't beat that fresh out of the oven. You let it sit.
Whether it's our artisan bread or
doesn't matter
bread or whatever, it's amazing.
It is amazing. It does not compare to store-bought ever, like ever. So, and you let it, you know, you bake it and you put it on the counter, let it cool just enough, you know, so that it can be cut and handled and eat it fresh. And then it usually we'll slice up the whole loaf, whatever we're eating, sometimes 2 loaves. There's 8 of us, you know, no judgment. So we'll slice up the whole loaf, and if there's any left, it's pre-sliced for the next morning. I'll usually just put it in storage, like a Tupperware or something, and then toast it up for
like toast and jelly for breakfast. It's so good.
Yes, and I will say, just in case you haven't considered it, one of our favorite ways, very favorite ways to eat either the sourdough or the crusty bread loaves is once it's sliced is to get some delicious brie cheese with some fig jam, and it's like the best lunch ever, or the best breakfast ever, and you just can't beat it. So homemade bread is such a delight and such a treat. And knowing that it only has a handful of small, beautiful ingredients that come together to create something so delicious and so amazing. Like, you cannot go wrong, and you will not regret learning how to do these things. So those are some of the top questions that we get all the time, day in and day out, when it comes to sourdough. I love that we're always experimenting with new recipes, and we tend to always share these recipes with all of you over at the channel. So make sure you check that out. You know, we have our cookbooks available, our digital beautiful cookbooks, which have some of our very favorite homemade bread recipes. You're not gonna wanna miss that. Now, our sourdough is not in there because I foresee a sourdough cookbook coming out soon. So make sure you stay tuned and check out our cookbooks that we have available. I would love to hear from all of you. I would love to hear about your tips and tricks when it comes to sourdough, or if you have any other questions, make sure you leave them down in the comments so that we can all enjoy them and read them and learn. We appreciate you. Thank you, Julianne, for answering our questions, and we will see you all in the next video.